Well, first I wasn't in Berkeley. I tried to get a job in Berkeley because I had come to Berkeley visiting my mom, and I saw this is the place. There weren't any jobs at that point. The funding was very tight. So where I could get a job, I worked for Kaiser across the bay, and that job was certainly not connected in any way. It was not possible, and I had too many things to preoccupy. 3 little kids, and trying to make sure I could pay the mortgage. Well, we were renting at first, but make the rent and so forth. But what happened is that I had, in my residency, I had taken some extra classes on forensic psychiatry, psychiatry and the law. And it happened to be that on the faculty was the most prominent, what you'd call forensic psychiatrist in Colorado, Dr. John McDonald. And he was a good guy, and he had his own point of view. It wasn't nearly as radical as mine ended up being, but he was pretty open to other people's ideas. But in that training, I pretty much accepted the role that psychiatry was you should play in the law. Remember I talked about community psychiatry, it's kind of a liberal model. That is a belief that psychiatry could help. You know, sometimes the liberal side ends up with the biggest readiness to do big things in the name of helping society, and it can be the most dangerous. That became a major theme of my work. So I was pretty much accepting, and there was a book which captured the flavor of it by Carl Menninger, a famous psychiatrist in those days, called The Crime of Punishment. And it was all about how it was uncivilized to be punishing people who were committing crimes because they only committed crimes because of poverty, and they were victims, and so we should help them. Well, how do you help people who are incarcerated? You don't help them, according to the theory, by passing a punishment when maybe they're reformed before the punishment is over. Why do that? Let them go when you've determined that they are ready to be released and ready to contribute to society. On the other hand, maybe they're not ready, so keep them longer and help them longer. So it was a medical model. That's the way. You don't sentence a patient to a hospital. You treat the patient till they get enough help that they don't need the hospital anymore. And it was so seductive. Even my generally skeptical or style, I accepted it. And so it was being taught. And I went through, and I came out to California, and I had a job. Well, just at the time that I came to California with Lona and the kids, there were some big things happening in California prisoners. This is all outlined in a book that I did in 1984 called The Reign of Error, Psychiatry, Authority, and Law. I describe all that. But so I began to see, after working for Kaiser for a little less than a year, I got a job again in Marin County, not yet Berkeley, even though we were living here, as a head of the crisis department or emergency department of the county mental health services in Marin County. And that's when I began to change my views and say, you know what? I'm seeing some things that psychiatry is doing that is the problem, not the solution. For example, I began to recognize that when you sentence somebody to an indeterminate amount of time, under the idea that you're going to help them and get them ready to go sooner, that'll be, well, aren't you good? You help them get out quicker. But on the other hand, if they need more help, you don't want to deprive them of more help. This was a form of torture. Imagine going into prison and you don't know, and your family doesn't know, the people that are important in your life, they don't even know when you're going to get out. And not only that, some parole board decides when you get out. And how are they deciding? Well, partly because they're asking psychiatrists to come and evaluate whether you're ready to get out. Well, it didn't take me long to realize this is nonsense. This is brutal. This is wrong. And So actually within months of arriving in the Bay Area, all this hit the news, the headlines. George Jackson was a prisoner who had been sentenced, and then there was a shootout in Soledad prison and a lot of stuff happening. And what I did, the very first activity I got involved was the prison reform groups where lawyers and prisoners were collaborating with each other to change the law about give a person a more definite sentence, cut down the influence of psychiatry's evaluations, which they didn't have a way of knowing whether somebody was released from prison. It was all smokescreen for political decision-making. So I realize I'm kind of compressing that, but that's where I'm now involved in those kind of activities. So here I am, I got basically my private practice, and my private practice is not involved in radical politics, but it is going against the grain because I did not like the drugs. Going back to medical school, I saw shock treatment. I saw it when they took us to the state hospital, and I was appalled. The idea that you can send enough electricity into somebody's brain to make them different immediately. I said, that's got to be bad for people. That's terrible. I wouldn't do that to my worst enemy. And the drugs that were becoming popular, I saw them at medical school, certainly saw it in residency, and I thought, my view of psychiatry became, and it started in medical school, but it just kept growing, is psychiatry really shouldn't be part of medicine except in a few situations where medical diseases that are scientifically determined have a mental component. Obviously, if you have a stroke, you're going to get depressed as well as because of your limitation, as well as your intellectual deficit, which is now there, that wasn't there. Or if you have a bad habit, a weakness that you become an alcoholic, it's not a disease. I never believed that. I don't believe it to this day. But it does have medical consequences by screwing up your physiology, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a place for a medically trained person in the mental health field, but not to make them medical doctors and then going into psychiatry, because anyway, all that was really clear to me by the time I was beginning my psychiatric career. But of course, I learned a lot more as I went along. But that's what happened when I got to California. And eventually, I mean, after a couple of years in county mental health, I then was totally in private practice and starting to get involved regularly in a variety of legal issues. But always the same theme was psychiatry is misplaced. It's the whole theory of what we do is wrong. It's not medical. And if this is the time, we can go into that, but that's by 1971, 72, that was established, and I was gradually beginning to do more and more things because people were hearing about it and asking me to do things.